Welcome to the Literacy Strategies mini lesson sample for Education 333. This is meant to provide you with some guidelines, an overview of this assessment, as well as provide you with a sample and a template. I'm going to be using the ELA vocabulary vignette, which is page 23 of Bringing Literacy Strategies into Content Instruction from Module 2. I created a sample using that particular piece. So if you want to, you can scroll back to Module 2, check out that little vocabulary vignette, and then you'll see that that's what I actually used to put this in presentation form so that you could see what I'm expecting from a mini lesson. I'm going to use this presentation to provide a sample and review the expectations. It will also provide a template for your mini lesson. You may follow the template exactly as I have, modifying it to fit your needs, or you can come up with some other method entirely. It's up to you. Slides 5 through 14 provide a template of a student literacy strategies mini lesson. The other slides are my commentary that tell you what the assignment's expectations are. The objectives for this assignment are for students to implement a literacy strategy as part of a mini lesson on a self-selected domain-specific secondary topic. So it will be your choice from your particular content area. Again, as I recommended in class, pick something that you have a good working knowledge of so that you can spend your time developing the literacy strategy rather than learning so much about the concept or the historical period or the literary piece. The students will explain the literacy strategy to their peers, and then they will demonstrate its effectiveness within the context of the mini lesson. The students will reflect on the effectiveness of their implementation of the literacy strategy and use the field experience evaluation to rate their progress. So number 3 will actually be done after you perform your lesson. You present your lesson to the class. We're going to video you teaching using Swivel, and you will use that videoed lesson to reflect on your own performance. Of course, the first step was for you to sign up for a literacy strategy mini lesson by the specified day on the sign-up sheet on Moodle. You needed to use the resources on Moodle. There's a literacy strategies and the lesson planning. Those are in the resources section on our Moodle site, as well as any outside resources that you like to learn about your strategy. Some of them you can Google the topics and lots of really cool things come up. The third step would be to actually design your mini lesson, which needs to explain the literacy strategy to your peers and demonstrate how to implement the strategy in your specific domain. You should engage your peers just as you would your students, and your peers will be expected to participate as students would. Of course, we want to keep the spitballs and things like that to a minimum. Number 4, the mini lesson should be about 15 to 20 minutes in length. 15 minutes is a really good marker to strive for. At 25 minutes, I actually will stop you. And I'll give you a warning and kind of let you know that's coming up as indiscreetly as I possibly can. But we simply want to be fair in the scoring and the grading. We want to make sure that everyone has about the same amount of time. Number 5, the mini lesson should provide a brief context for the lesson, should set it up for us by explaining the origin, history, connection, etc. of the topic. It should provide a brief text for students to read. This can be very small. I'm actually going to show you a sample that in this presentation it's only 1 page. Everything comes from 1 page. 1 to 2 pages would be fine. I wouldn't recommend doing any more than that. That your classmates need to be able to refer to it, but it doesn't need to be so time consuming that it takes up a large portion of the mini lesson. It should provide some sort of assessment so you can assess their learning. It can be a quick quiz, a concluding discussion, an interactive formative activity, etc. Of course, all of the work should be carefully proofread. Make sure you use MLA or APA format. I accept either one. You really should figure out which one your domain uses So for example, English is going to be MLA, and your science courses are going to be APA. Math and history sometimes have their own documentation styles, but typically they'll do MLA or APA as well. Points will be deducted for errors, and work with excessive errors will not be graded on first submission, and it will result in a late penalty. And of course, this is going to apply to your reflection essay. You will definitely want to make sure that anything you present to your classmates, you've had someone proofread it for you, edit it for you, and that you've gone over that. Here are the scoring guidelines. It's 50 points total, and in order to earn the 50 points, the student completed all parts of the assignment with fidelity, demonstrating a high level of attention to detail and organization. The lesson's fee ratings averaged at the proficient level or above, and this is an average overall, and that's at the 3 level. And the lesson demonstrated an insightful application of the literacy strategy. The student's self-reflection was comprehensive and thoughtful, supported by sufficient evidence from the lesson, as well as content pedagogical knowledge of literacy strategies and instruction. And of course, you can see that points are simply deducted for any of those elements that are missing. This slide is where a mini lesson would actually start. So notice you've got your title. This will be Pudd'nhead Wilson by Mark Twain. That would be my content, what I would be teaching to the class. And then I've got my heading. So I would have my name. My heading would be there just like it would be for any other paper or anything you turn in. And then a little explanation of what the lesson's going to be about. So I'm just going to jump in and present it as I would if I were really teaching this. Pudd'nhead Wilson by Mark Twain. This lesson will provide students with methods to learn challenging vocabulary words to enhance their understanding of the novel. I know as a high school student, you're probably wondering, why do we need to learn specialized vocabulary strategies? We did that kind of stuff in middle school. Well, number one, when a text is more complex, the vocabulary may be more challenging. And in this case, our novel was published in 1894. It contains some words that are not even part of our common contemporary lexicon. The language is simply a little bit denser, so it takes time for us to decode what the words are so that we can make sense of the novel. The novel is a satire, and we know that satire relies heavily on irony to convey its meaning. It will be important for us to understand all the words so that we can infer what the meaning is by understanding the tone. We know how critical tone is. And then thirdly, learning to decode new words is an important skill that we can use in any field of study. So it's good to build it as we read this novel because it's a highly transferable skill. So let me explain what your assignment is going to be. You are actually going to construct a personal dictionary. Of course, this is going to help you better understand the novel, which will improve your assessments as we read, but also it will help you build your vocabulary. In each chapter of the novel, you will most likely encounter words that you do not know the meaning of. In fact, depending on the chapter and your particular reading style, it may be many words. You will use one or all 3 vocabulary strategies, which I'm about to review with you, to determine the meaning of the word. Then you will record the word, the strategy you used, and the definition in your personal dictionary. If you look on the right, it's going to be a basic little chart that's set up like this on basic notebook paper or binder paper. So our first strategy is going to be morphemes. Morphemes is when we use word parts to decode the meanings of words. Essentially, this means that we break an unfamiliar word up into its prefix, its suffix, and its root word. And we remember the meanings of the prefixes and the suffixes in the root word. We take those meanings and we put them together to try to construct the meaning of this unfamiliar word. If you look at the handout that I gave you, which I understand it's not exactly what's on the screen, but I tried to give you more. I want you to keep this in your notebook. I want you to keep it somewhere close to your personal dictionary so that as you're reading the novel, you can quickly look over and refer to this morpheme chart and that would be your first attempt, would be to try to break the word down to see if you can figure out what it means from its word parts. Okay? Our second strategy will be to use context clues. So I've included this as part of your handout as well. What does a context clue look like? These are the 5 basic tips about how authors incorporate context clues. Sometimes they use synonyms, sometimes antonyms, sometimes explanations, sometimes specific examples, and then sometimes what we call general sense context clues. They can use a synonym when they put a word that is similar in meaning right next to the unfamiliar word. So here's an example. Philippe is a miser. He's always been cheap. So being cheap is, of course, the definition of miser. An antonym does the exact same thing, but it uses a word with an opposite meaning. So an example is Stella has always dressed flamboyantly. Sorry about that. I've never seen her wear a dull color. So we can tell by the way it's phrased in the negative. The second sentence is a negation. This means that flamboyantly is the opposite of dull. So in this case, Stella must dress pretty colorfully. The third one is an explanation. This means that the author is going to provide an explanation somewhere near that unfamiliar word. So the example is, on Friday, we visited the Arboretum, a garden dedicated to the exhibition of trees and plants. So notice right behind it is that phrase that lets us know what that vocabulary word is. Authors also use specific examples. So the text provides one or more examples used to define the term. The children were able to observe several crustaceans, including crabs, lobsters, and shrimp. So in case you didn't know what a crustacean was, they gave you 3 different kinds of things that you may know the meaning of to help you understand what they're talking about for crustaceans. And then the last one is called a general sense context clue. It lets the reader puzzle out a word meaning from whatever information is available. This is actually the most common kind. The relationships between words sometimes cannot be broken into those other 4 categories, but instead it's implied some way through the text. So that number 5 is kind of like the catch-all. But our first strategy would be morphemes. Our second strategy would be using context clues. Our third strategy is to use a dictionary. So looking up words on your phone, tablet, or laptop is a quick and easy strategy that gives you the exact meaning of a word. However, you will not be able to do this on assessments. So try the other 2 strategies first, because we want to build those skills of using morphemes and context clues. Then use this strategy as a last resort. You can download an app or simply use your internet browser. Let's watch this brief video to remind ourselves of the parts of a dictionary so that as you look up words, you can become very familiar with the way that they're broken down. I'm not actually going to show you this little video, but it's extremely cute and it's a great reminder of the parts of a book. It's about 2 minutes. So this is a good place for me to let you know, yes, it's fine to use a video. There are some wonderful videos, short videos, 2 or 3 minutes, something like that. You could open up and that could help you set your context. You could use it to help teach a part of your lesson, even the literacy strategy itself, or you could use them as part of your closure. I recommend not going over 5 minutes with your video though. It's a little bit long for the nature of this assignment, but roughly 2 to 3 minutes, you'd be fine. Feel free to watch this one on your own. All right, let's go ahead and do a sample together. And I will model exactly how to use each one of these strategies. We're going to use the text below to apply the 3 strategies and determine the meaning of the vocabulary word. Percy Northumberland Driscoll, brother to the judge and younger than he by 5 years, was a married man and had had children around his hearthstone, but they were attacked in detail by measles, croup, and scarlet fever, and this had given the doctor a chance with his effective antediluvian methods, so the cradles were empty. I don't know what antediluvian means, but the word seems important to understanding the character and the events that followed. The first step in our process is the morpheme analysis. So we're going to divide the word into its parts. I can see the prefix anti, so notice that I've already put that in the chart, the suffix an, and I think that the root must be diluvi. The next step is to determine the meanings of those parts. The prefix is kind of familiar to me. I've seen it in words like anteroom and antecedent. So an anteroom is kind of like a foyer. It's a small room that comes before a larger room or the main room. An antecedent, of course, is what a pronoun refers to. So it's the noun that came before the pronoun. So that kind of helps me understand that ante and ante must mean before. Now, if we look at diluvi, I'm not positive what that means, but I can check my list. So can I have someone check the list for me? Yes, it means flood or deluge. Very good. So now the third step is going to be to put the parts together. So essentially what this means is before the flood. That's not really sparking anything for me. So I need to go to this second strategy, which would be to examine the context clues. And in this case, if I put in before the flood, where it goes in context and read everything around it, it's still not giving me a whole lot of understanding or meaning. So there's nothing about flooding in this text. So now the next step, the third step, is going to be I need to go to the dictionary because I really think that this word is key to understanding this character. So when I go to the dictionary, I find out that it actually has two meanings. So I'm going to go ahead. Yep, let me go ahead and say what those are, or somebody could look it up and follow along with me. The first is of or belonging to the period before the flood. Notice that's a capital F. So we're talking about the account in Genesis 7 and 8. And then the second definition would be very old, old-fashioned, out of date, antiquated, primitive. So I see that the morphemic analysis I did was actually correct because it is referring to a flood, but not just any flood. It's referring to the flood with a capital F. So in this case, that would have happened a long time ago. So in context, it is making sense. It's antiquated. The novel doesn't necessarily make sense to a religion though. So I don't think that that's going to be the first definition they're going for. The second one is actually perfect though, and it underscores that meaning. So in this case, very old, antiquated, out of date completely makes sense because those primitive methods would not have been probably very effective in treating those diseases. That would explain why the last sentence makes sense. All the cradles were empty. So his out-of-date methods couldn't cure the illnesses, so the babies died. Antediluvian then is a kind of insult that Mark Twain is making. And it tells me a lot about Percy Driscoll and what I'm supposed to think about this character in the story. I'm going to go ahead and record that word because I think it's very important for me to put down in my definition. He's going to become I can already tell he's a pretty important character in the book. And so adding that word to my characterization of him is probably going to be pretty important. So I'm definitely going to add, this would be one I would add to my notebook. And so I hope that this sample lets you see how understanding the word really unlocks some of the meaning for you, not only just of that one passage, but of the character himself. And actually of Mark Twain and how subtly he would put little insults in like that about his characters. All right, let's move along. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put you into small groups. And we're actually going to use our groups from yesterday when we were doing the previous pre-reading activity. So if you would, you're just going to get back with those groups that I've already assigned you to. But before you split up and before you break up, let me go over the norms and expectations. On the right-hand side of the screen, and this is also on your handout, but I've given you just this small chunk of text from the chapter that you're going to be reading, so you'll actually get kind of a jump start on your assignment today. So with this group, you're going to use your 3 strategies to complete an entry in your personal notebook for your assigned word. So there is 1 word per group, and you'll be working on it together very quickly. This will only take about 5 minutes. And I've already pre-selected the words. When you do this chunk on your own, when you do the chapter on your own, if you see another one that you would like to add, feel free. And of course, some of these you might really already know the meaning of, and it's not one that you would add to your notebook. That's fine. But maybe all 5 of them, you need a little bit more refinement in your understanding. Each group will add your entry to the next slide, and so you're going to be able to access that via our class site. And each group is going to go ahead and add your entry, and then we will have one spokesperson present those findings to the class. This will actually not only give us the meanings of the vocabulary words, but an example of what our notebooks need to look like after we've started this project. So those are your words: group 1, diligence; group 2, reverence; group 3, obsequiousness; group 4, homage; group 5, usurper. So at this point, you would give your groups about 5 minutes, and notice that they would need to fill this chart out. And it's going to take about 3 to 5 minutes. They'll be in a group, and it doesn't take a long time. And then everybody would present those, or if time is running short, you could simply show it and put it up on the screen. And you could say, okay, students, this will be on our website for you to look at for homework. As you're doing your homework, model yours after these. This also gives you an opportunity, and this is where the assessment portion comes in. If any of these are wrong, or if the formatting is wrong, or if they're not really doing the strategies the correct way, it's a very quick formative assessment, and you can use this time to just tweak and make little corrections for the students. As we read Mark Twain's Pudd'nhead Wilson, don't be intimidated by the challenging text. Taking time to understand the vocabulary will improve your reading comprehension. Remember to use our 3 strategies: morphemes, context clues, and dictionaries. Your homework is to read the first chapter and start your personal dictionary. When we return to class, we will discuss the vocabulary words you have added and how learning their meanings contributed to your understanding of the chapter. All right, and at that point, your presentation would be over, but you wouldn't be finished with the assignment. This is after your presentation. This is what you have to do. So you have 1 week from the time that you present to submit a self-reflection, and it needs to include these 2 things. A, the fee needs to be self-scored. So the lessons are going to be videoed using Swivel, and you will watch your mini lesson, and then you're going to score yourself on domains 2, 3, and 5 of the fee. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. The second part of the self-reflection is writing a 1 to 2 page reflection of the exercise, explaining the decision making that inspired and informed your decisions, justifying your fee self-score with evidence from the lesson, discussing the lesson's strengths, and providing an explanation of what you plan to change when you teach in the future. So you can say this specific lesson, or you can simply say in general, perhaps maybe about sequencing, pacing, the way that you planned, etc. So the field experience evaluation form, the fee as it's known, of course, in our college, is very important, and it becomes a very, very important part of your student teaching and residency experience. You're going to be using parts 2.1, the classroom environment; 2.2, managing student behavior; 3.1, instruction; 3.2, engaging students in learning; 3.3, using assessment instruction; and 5, which is your content specific one. So English, social studies, agriculture, etc. You are going to access that via Moodle. I have it on Moodle in the resources section with all of these other resources for the mini lesson, literacy strategies mini lesson. So if you have any questions about those, just shoot an email or ask me in class if you have any questions about what any parts of that rubric mean. And I hope that this presentation clarified what the assignment is and what my expectations are. And I hope that you learn a lot from it, not just yourself and your own strategy, but I think you will learn a lot from getting to see your peers teach and also the strategies that they are going to bring to us each week. So let me know if you have any questions moving forward. Don't forget there are lots of resources on Moodle, and you can always Google these strategies and lots of great stuff comes up. You're welcome to use some of the samples that you find online. There's so much good stuff. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So once again, let me know if you have any questions.